Hey everybody, I'm back again with another vlog entry. Today's topic is going to be America's pastime, baseball. One of the really the only two sports that I care about, but a sport that I loved ever since I was a kid. Used to play baseball back in junior high. Never really any good at it, but I started off as an outfielder on the junior varsity team. But I was mostly there to get foul balls out of the rose bushes. I wanted to be a catcher eventually because that's just a position I was better suited for, not being super athletic. Um, there were a bunch of catchers already ahead of me, so that really wasn't happening. But in retrospect, it might be good. I'm not really so much of a battlefield general, which is what the catcher position is. I think less pressure in the outfield. I would have done better out there. But anyway, I used to play a little bit. Played with friends as a kid. Baseball's always been a big part of my life. For those of you who don't know my situation, I kind of grew up in a unique one. I grew up with my parents and grandparents all in the same house. I was really close to my grandparents, and my grandfather was a huge baseball fanatic. So I remember being a little kid. I'd be upstairs, and my grandfather would come by the stairs and kind of knock on the wall or call out to me and say, "Hey, your friends are on TV," and I'd go down in the basement and watch the Yankees games with him. So growing up, I was a huge Yankee fan. He would sit there. My grandfather was born in 1910, so he grew up in the legendary golden age of baseball. He'd tell me about Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, Phil Rizzuto. All these legendary players. He'd tell me about the bums that left for California years ago, meaning the Dodgers and the Giants. So a lot of fond memories of watching baseball with my grandfather. Watching a lot of classic Yankee games, and like I said, I was a huge Yankee fan growing up, just because of the bond I had with my grandfather. I saw Dave Righetti, who was a longtime Yankee pitcher. He was a starter. He threw a no hitter and then eventually kind of transitioned into a reliever. So I watched that back in, I think it was '83. We watched that game together, which was really cool. But as I got a little bit older and I wanted to start going to games, my mom was not going to take me into the Bronx. So she ended up taking me to Shea Stadium to see the Mets. And just over time, I became a Mets fan, which is fine. I have nothing against the Yankees. I just, grew into more of a Mets fan. I do remember her and my stepdad taking me to the first game I ever went to. They played the Giants. I think they were losing, but we left in the seventh inning, which was classic mom. She liked to leave early. But just thinking back to that time, like I said, I not that I still didn't watch the Yankees with my grandfather, but eventually just moved more into the Mets. One time I was with my dad and my cousin and my uncle. We were at the horse track. Long story, but we ran into Gary Carter, my cousin and I, so we got his autograph, and that was cool. And he was like my favorite player back in the day, besides Mookie Wilson. If you don't know who Mookie Wilson is, he's famous for like the hit, the Mets history. They got the hit that went through Bill Buckner's legs that won Game 6 of the '86 World Series. It's kind of funny because that's really when baseball took off for me. Even though I had been watching it all those years, with my grandfather, once I got into the Mets, and here they are, bang, they're going to the World Series. So it's just funny because I wasn't allowed to stay up, so I actually had to go to sleep before Game 7 and didn't find out until next morning from my grandfather that the Mets had won the World Series. But like I said, it was just a cool time for me being a kid where I could really appreciate it. There wasn't other stuff going on. It was baseball, hockey, whatever. So I remember very vividly the '86 season. A lot of my all-time favorite players, baseball players, not just Mets players, were from that year. So that was just kind of cool. As I got a little bit older, we had the benefit living in Port Washington, New York, where I did. We had a train that took us directly into New York City, but right before that, you would go to Shea Stadium. Like the train would go literally from my hometown right to Shea Stadium. So as I got a little bit older in my teen years, kind of like I did with hockey, we didn't have to drive, but we'd get on the train, go see the Mets games or whatnot, and kind of like the Islanders, that was an era that the Mets weren't that good after they won the championship. Um, they went to the semifinals again in 1988, but after that it was kind of downhill, But it was still kind of fun. Same thing like we did with the hockey games, Get on the train. It was like $7 round trip. Get the cheap seats, go sit in the upper deck. Burning up in the summertime because it was wide open and the sun's beating down on you. But it was just, it was a live game. It was cool. Did it with a bunch of friends, so we always enjoyed that. You know, then in high school, as I got a little bit older, my two best friends at the time, two brothers that I talk about in the hockey video, they were Yankee fans. My cousin was a Yankee fan. I was pretty much the only Met fan, either friends and family, and so my high school girlfriend was a big Yankee fan, and her sister, so they always wanted to go to Yankee games, and I wasn't one for the city. I've never liked New York City. I don't hate it, but it's too crowded. Driving in it is a nightmare. I don't know anything about the Bronx or anything. I could get to Queens to Shea Stadium if I had to, but I prefer to take the train. But anyway, um, you know, she wanted to go to a game with her sister, and we ended up going as a big group. The two brothers, her and her sister. I don't think my cousin went, but anyway. So we're there in the summertime, and I just remember it was like 96 degrees in July. The sun was beating down on us. We're in the upper deck roasting like hot dogs on a grill, and I remember her younger sister kind of had a thing for Derek Jeter, like every other woman in New York, at that time. And she was like, "Oh, he was in the on deck circle, kind of doing like this, kind of waving his bat, warming up as they always do." And I was kind of an ass back then, And she's like, "Oh, look, he waved at me," and I'm like, "Yeah, you, and not the other 60,000 women in the audience." So I got a good slap across the face for that one. I guess I deserved it. Uh, I do also remember a different time when I was a little bit younger. My cousin's older sister, her husband, who's like the nicest guy in the world. I mean, one of the nicest people I've ever met. Somehow or another, they had I don't know what you would call it. Like they had tickets to the suite at Yankee Stadium, which is kind of like the fancy schmancy thing that usually corporations have or whatnot. So that was kind of a neat experience. I had never been through anything like that before. So we went. I was probably I don't know, maybe around 10 years old, whatever it was. My cousin. I think we even dragged my aunt and uncle, believe it or not, who are not baseball fans at all, but so all of us are there in Yankee Stadium in the sweet box, which was like all the hot dogs you can eat for a kid, all the sodas you can drink, whatever. And we were just having a good time, and I was sitting like right on the edge. We were behind home plate, and I had my glove. A lot of people bring kids, especially, they bring their gloves to the game. You try to catch a foul ball, and I just remember like all game I'm sitting there, and I was getting frustrated, and I was like, I'm hungry, and I get up to go get a drink or get a hot dog or whatever, and boom, I hear this loud noise. Foul ball hit right where it was sitting. Where it's like, okay, I might not have caught it, but I mean, I had a chance of catching it, and it was hit by George Brett, who was like one of the best players ever in the history of baseball. So that was kind of funny. I just remember later that day too. I was out in like the hallway there, and saw somebody that like an older gentleman that was a big crowd around him. So I'm thinking like, oh man, this is like one of the famous Yankees. Let me try to go up and get his autograph. And he turned out to be like some opera singer or something like that. So my cousin got a good laugh out of that. So just memories like that. Once I moved to Houston in 1999. Unlike the Islanders in hockey, where there's no pro team really in this area unless you count Dallas, 4 hours away. Um, I was able to see the Mets when they would come to town, play the Houston Astros. I never saw a baseball game in the Houston Astrodome. I saw some rodeos there, but by the time I moved down, they called it Enron Field at the time, and then after that it got renamed Minute Maid Park. I don't even know what the heck it's called right now, but where the Astros play right now. I had an opportunity to go see the Mets play there a couple of times, and I think they won pretty much every time they played the Astros. I think they gave them a pretty good drubbing, which was kind of neat to see them again. But kind of like when I left New York the first time. For many, many years, I had lost interest in the game. You know, I started losing interest about 1994, which conveniently is like, when I had my first real high school girlfriend. So, like, that factors into it, even though we used to go to the games and stuff. But, there was also the strike that year. Um, Look, I'm all about capitalism, okay? But sometimes these players get a little ridiculous. When you're making like a bajillion dollars a year, you're not you're not hurting, okay? That's it. You're not like the rest of us, nickel and diming, living check to check, okay? So I'm all for you getting compensated for your skills and abilities that you have, but don't get excessive, okay? And, you know, everybody's griping about the owners of these sports teams. You know, they still have a lot of expenses, a lot of risk, a lot of people they got to pay. So, you know, there's both sides to that argument. Anyway, long story short, I'm not talking about politics or any of that crap today here. Uh, you know, so the strike happened. Then after that, you know, baseball was kind of looking for something to bring the national interest back in. That's when you had the home run chase. You know, Roger Maris's 61 home runs a year record that had stood for many years. You know, you had Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, that whole summer of whatever year it was. You know, and then come to find out they're both roid heads. I'm very adamant. I'm not a big fan of steroid users. I think it really cheapens the game. I know that there's a lot of very famous players, especially in that era, that were, you know, even one I liked, Mike Piazza, I was a fan of, but then found out, you know, he was into this stuff. Not a big fan of that. But the ironic thing is, you know, guys like Barry Bonds, guys like Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa, like they were extremely talented individuals before. You didn't need that, you know, but they kind of not flushed their careers because they still went on and had their careers, you know, but it's got you know, a little asterisk mark next to it, like, you know, you're always wondering in the back of your mind, you know. I mean, I never liked any of those guys, except for Piazza, you know, but even that, as more and more came out about that, I kind of lost respect for him. But, you know, the thing is, like, when you're that talented, do you really need to do that and, you know, flush your public image? All right, we're not going to talk about that. I don't want to get hung up on that, but, you know, just suffice to say that was that era of steroids. So, you know, it's exciting to see a monster home run hit 500, 600 feet, whatever it is. But, you know, if you really got to cheat, I'm sorry. You know, I have a lot more respect for guys that do it naturally. You know, you might not be the best player on the team, but you're playing with your heart. You know, I'm going to have more respect for that guy. What's another topic I can talk about baseball real quick? You know, Pete Rose. That's a popular one. You know, the world we live in these days, morality has kind of gone out the window. You know, and there's always a lot of discussion about, you know, Pete Rose, what he did versus what these steroids guys do. For those of you who don't know, Pete Rose um, on the field was one of the greatest players of all time. The all-time hits leader. I don't think anybody's going to catch that in our lifetime. Off the field, total, complete, utter douchebag. Okay, no argument that. Okay, here's the thing. I personally feel, and my opinion ain't worth a squat, but my personal opinion is what you do on the field is what you should be recognized for. So, as a player, he was one of the best ever. Okay, so I feel he should be considered for the Hall of Fame. What screwed it up was when he was a manager, he bet on his own team, and then when he got caught, he lied about it. Like, if he would have come clean, I think none of this would have happened. I think Pete Rose would have been in the Hall of Fame. I think he deserves it as what he did as a player. But, you know, it's like the whole, well, you gambled as a manager, you know, you finagled, God only knows what you did to win, to lose, to make some money on the side, whatever. So I see both sides of the argument. Whereas the steroid guys, I don't see any. I just see one side of the argument, like, disqualify these guys because they cheated. You know, they cheated in a different way. They cheated physically. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. I could sit here and talk for hours about that. You know, so just baseball is something. As years went on, eventually I got back interested in it again. Like I said, I had access to it, unlike I did with hockey, where I could really go see an Islander game unless I wanted to drive 4 hours up to Dallas, which, you know, I had never done until December of last year when Rebecca and I went and saw a game up there. But, you know, baseball I had access to. Never really had anything against the Yankees, but, you know, like I said, I cared more for the Mets. You know, I'm happy the Yankees are successful and whatnot. But, you know, a couple of years ago, much like I did with hockey, I got back into the Mets and got really interested in them again. And being, you know, that I was in New Orleans, we were in New Orleans for 2 months short of 10 years. You know, once I was there, it was like then similar to the Islander thing, I had no access to it because there was no professional teams down there. they had the Mets minor league team that was there for like the first 5 years that we were there, but I never once saw a game. I mean, it was like $4 to go, but and 10 minutes away from me, but we just never took the time to to actually go see a game. But baseball is the thing. Even if you love the sport, I'll be honest with you, it can be very boring at times. It's a lot of I wouldn't say it's a mental game, but there's a lot of strategy involved. A lot of nuance. So, but I I still think hockey is the most exciting sport. But as silly as it sounds, baseball's still my favorite sport. Not just because I'm a red, white, and blue American kid. That I actually played baseball on a team. Versus hockey where we just played out in the street and whatnot. But it just it's a sport that I've always loved, kind of like hockey. Since I was a kid, I've enjoyed it. Especially with the fond memories I have of baseball with my grandfather. Going to the games, hopping on the train, just going to the games. Um, I've been unfortunate in one regard that the teams that I really love, the Islanders and the Mets. It's like the Islanders, I was too young to appreciate their dynasty era, and then we went through 20 years of suckage, and now they're getting good again. The Mets, when I first got into them, was that little, I don't want to say dynasty because they won in '86. They were so-so in '87. They went back to the playoffs in '88, but then kind of fell apart. I mean, when I was in the Army in 2000, they were actually playing the Yankees in the World Series that the Yankees won, but I didn't really get to see it or enjoy it. But baseball is just one of those things. It's another one of those very, I don't want to say, like I was talking about in my hockey video, very what's the word I used? Regional, but baseball is kind of all over the place. Not so much as hockey because most states, well, not I take that back. Most areas of the country have some kind of team somewhere remotely close to them, or on TV or something like that. Even as a kid, I remember every pretty much either every Saturday or Sunday growing up, it was like the NBC game of the week, and it was always the Cubs. So I wouldn't say I was a Cubs fan, but I was always kind of fond of them. Never hated them. I loved the jerseys. Got an old Army buddy up in Chicago who I know is a big Cubs fan. So salute to you. I was kind of happy when they finally won the World Series. A couple of years back after got like what almost 100 years. I was watching the game in the late '90s. I think it was the late '90s when they were playing the Florida Marlins, and that guy Steve Bartman reached out and tried to grab the hit that interfered with the Cubs outfielder catching the ball, and the next thing you know, they lose. Whereas they were like 5 outs away from going to the World Series. So like that poor guy had his whole life upended. Sucks for him, but that's what you get for trying to reach and grab a ball still in play. But so I was happy for the Cubbies. I actually wrote about that one time on my Facebook. Not like a lengthy thing, but cool that they finally won after all that time. I don't, I can't go on about baseball as much as I could about hockey. It's like I said, it's kind of this weird paradigm where I love baseball as a sport more, but I have more positive memories of hockey, more relatable, memories that I could discuss. I just, I just saying, I do love baseball. Baseball is still my favorite sport, as odd as it seems. I know it's not making a lot of sense, but it is what it is. Still diehard Met fan. Got my Mets jersey on. Was a big fan of David Wright. That he was the Mets captain and had to retire recently after missing a whole lot of time from spinal stenosis. I hope it never comes out that he was a steroid user because I'd be really disappointed in that. It seemed like he was just a true gentleman, great guy. Grew up in Virginia, Mets fan. Hero to a lot of people. Unfortunately had to retire early, but. I remember watching his last game a couple of years back. I have that video downloaded. That was just like a really emotional thing. He fought so hard to come back after missing so much time, and God only knows how much pain the guy was in, but he fought to come back, and he got his one farewell, and that was really cool. So that's it. I just wanted to briefly touch on my love of baseball. Like I said, I don't have as much to talk about with baseball as I do with hockey, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you can relate. And if you guys have any baseball stories you want to talk about, definitely let me know in the comments, or, just reach out to me on Facebook or whatever and we can chat about it. And I will see you guys in the next video.